Hello teachers, I'm Becky Olson and I get to talk with you today about Lesson 67, which is Assess Your Learning number 4. I want us to accomplish 3 things today. First, variations on that introductory activity. Second, I have a worksheet that can guide the review of the law of consecration. And third, a thinking routine that supports the reflection portion of the lesson as the students reflect on their learning. Okay, let's jump into the lesson, Lesson 67. I really like this possible learning activity at the beginning as the introductory activity with this map and marking landmarks. And I just wanted to give a few variations on this that you could consider for your class depending on where you meet and how many students you have. And you could do this as a whiteboard activity and put a location, say the high school or the church building. Choose one that is centrally located where students in your class would be coming at that location from different directions. And you could put that location on the whiteboard, hand several students markers, and let them map their way to get to that destination. Invite them to put landmarks along their path. Also, you could do this as a big piece of paper on a table, and you could give markers to kids and they could write that, or you could have them each draw their own individual map heading to that same destination, and they could do it on their own 8.5 by 11 piece of printer paper, and then you could put those papers up so that everybody could see them and see the different paths getting to that same location. Maybe point out that although everybody was going to the same destination, there were different paths. Now, some of them would probably start overlapping with some of those major landmarks. So just kind of point out some of those details. As you scroll down and you come to this question, this is such a great question. If our destination is to become more like Jesus Christ, what might be some of the spiritual landmarks that can help you know you are on track? If you scroll to this little paragraph right below that question, this little part I think is good. Look for evidence that you are becoming more like Jesus Christ as you have been studying the Doctrine and Covenants in recent weeks. Point out that these landmarks might be things that nobody else sees. It might be landmarks that only they can see. Maybe their desires are refining and becoming more pure. Maybe they've been giving more wholehearted effort. Some of these things may not be visible to others, but just visible to themselves. And give them just a minute or so to journal about some of the ways that they see progress towards that destination of becoming more like Jesus Christ. Now, if you have time in your lesson, you may even want to go back to that introductory activity and ask them, like, how would they compare these landmarks along the way to becoming Christ-like? What landmarks do all of us share and have to pass, and which landmarks would be different for everyone? So it might be good for them to think about how their path to becoming more Christ-like is a very unique path, but that all of us do have certain landmarks that we are like spiritual milestones with saving ordinances and whatnot that we all need to pass. This is the point in the lesson where you're going to segue into this destination of becoming more like Jesus Christ. You're going to connect this to the law of consecration so that the students can see that what they've been learning about the law of consecration helps them on this path to becoming more Christ-like. When we come down in the lesson to this part, what do you remember about the law of consecration and how do young people live the law of consecration today? This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at this through a different lens. So you might even say this very deliberately to the students, that instead of having that destination say become more like Jesus Christ, we're going to reframe that in a way that says have the desire to live a consecrated life. And Jesus Christ as the perfect example of living a consecrated life, that when we think about living a consecrated life, that is becoming more like Jesus Christ. So we're going to do a quick review about the law of consecration and a quick review of what they learned about that and some of these examples of what young people can do today to live the law of consecration. Then we're going to reflect on their learning and how they got there. But first, in order to do this quick review of these verses in Doctrine and Covenants, I personally don't know that they'll be able to just off the top of their head list things that they remember learning from that section. So I think it might be helpful to have a quick worksheet to hand out, and it can be print or it could be digital. I will share a link to that document in the video description, and I'm going to show that to you now and see how we can accomplish the purposes of this by using that worksheet. On this document, we have on the left-hand side the verses, some select verses from section 42, and on the right-hand side we have space for the youth to write examples of what young people can do to live the law of consecration today. Now I have called out a few words here. I've bolded a few words that can give them maybe a little bit of a leg up in coming up with ideas. Maybe helping in the gathering of Israel, maybe helping to, maybe keeping the commandments, maybe giving community service, paying tithing and fast offerings. So hopefully the youth will be able to come up with a lot of real substantial ideas about what they can do to live the law of consecration. Now I recommend just printing this off and letting them work with a partner to come up with the different ideas and to write it on the document. Okay, now we've accomplished this part where it's kind of laying the foundation and doing a little bit of a review of the law of consecration. And now we come to this part where they're actually going to be mentally measuring their growth. And this one is about where are you right now? And this one is where were you a few weeks ago? This type of reflection is going to help our youth to recognize that coming to seminary, studying the Doctrine and Covenants, doing their personal scripture studying, that it has made a difference and it has deepened their testimony and their understanding. We want to really celebrate that growth. So in order to call this out, I want us to use an idea. It's a thinking routine, and it's called I used to think, now I think. So let me show you where this comes from. Harvard Graduate School of Education has compiled these different thinking routines. These are ways of thinking that support critical thinking and problem solving, and we can use these types of thinking routines. It's like patterns or processes, these types of things to accomplish certain outcomes in the classroom. Now I'm going to go to these core thinking routines and come down to this one. I used to think, now I think. And if I just scroll down here and click on this right here, it opens up the page or the guide, and it tells us that this routine helps students reflect on their thinking about a topic and why their thinking has changed, and it helps consolidate new learning. So we want them to think about what has helped them to have a better understanding of the law of consecration and how to become more Christ-like. When you use I used to think, now I think, you just take a minute and have the students think about, and you actually present it that way. You can even, right here, it gives you some outlines of how you can say that. When we began our study of the law of consecration, you had some initial ideas about it. Take a minute to remember what ideas you previously had about the law of consecration. Maybe you could have them even share with a partner and just say, oh, I used to think this or that. Have them quickly share that. And then the next one, now think about your ideas now about the law of consecration. How have they changed as a result of what we've been studying in seminary? And so then they're able to verbalize, now I think, fill in the blank. Okay, so you've finished that. I used to think, now I think. And really the main point in that is to take these couple of questions here that are the reflecting and the assessing their learning. We're taking these big questions and we're just simplifying and clarifying what we want the students to do. And we're making it super simple. I used to think, now I think. And then we come back to the lesson and we move on, and you choose the other learning activities that are going to match up well with your class. Okay, I hope that these ideas were helpful, and I also hope that it was beneficial for each of you to take a minute to think about why these Assess Your Learning lessons are so important for our youth, and why it is really critical for them take a minute and stop and reflect and to really celebrate the growth that they're experiencing. Have a great week.